right, Module 6, pricing and revenue models. So why is pricing a design decision and not just a number that you plug into a spreadsheet? For years, it's always been you take your COGS and you double it or you triple it or multiply it by X, whatever is normal for your industry or your product, and that's what you go to market with. I like to think of it as more of the output of a system or models. So realistically, when you look at pricing, you look at revenue models, most founders treat pricing as a late stage decision. But realistically, pricing shapes behavior. It shapes your margins. Realistically, from a founder's perspective, it's your stress and your survival. Poor pricing isn't going to kill you immediately all the time, but it does weaken you slowly, and it really undermines the face of your product to the customer. Realistically, pricing determines how the money is going to move through your business. So it's fundamental to your business model. So if you treat pricing as a design constraint, you actually look at it as an output, and that is fed from various inputs, both from you as a founder, your customer. And so locking in those assumptions early gives you clarity about what the business is and who it's for. It kind of surfaces whether your model actually works or not. So the goal isn't to have perfect pricing, it's to be informed and then design around your constraints. In the AI era, a lot of that has really impacted pricing. It reduces your build time, it can reduce your head count. Now, two or three person companies can be doing what 30, 40, even 100-person companies were doing just 5 or 10 years ago. So there is definitely a reduction in some of that build time and some of those execution costs. However, if you're not locked in with your product market fit, your AI costs can actually get out of hand very, very quickly. So it's something to keep in mind. You want to build it in a very scalable way. Another thing to consider is that your pricing should reflect your value delivered, not your cost to produce it. And that's for two reasons. You don't want to leave money on the table, but you also don't want to be overinflating your sense of value, because that will alienate you from your customers. So even if AI improves your cost structure, but you're still delivering the same amount of value, then you don't necessarily have to reduce your price unless, of course, competition demands it. So that brings us kind of to the crux of what all of this is: pricing as a system. So you've got inputs, you've got your decisions, and then you've got your outputs. So we're going to start with our inputs, and that doesn't necessarily mean just one number. Certainly COGS, right? Your cost of goods, or if you're building an actual product, how much plastic do you need, or how much metal do you need, or how much fabric, or whatever, right? There's actual costs, and certainly you need to know that. It's not just those, though. It's also your delivery costs, the complexity of your delivery. Do you have to support your product or service during delivery or after it's been delivered? What are your strategic goals here? Is it profitability? Is it creating value? Is it growth? Is it expanding? Is it awareness? So these types of things can really affect what your end pricing is going to really be. So start with your inputs, understand what your market realities are, things like willingness to pay, what are the alternatives for your customers, what is the urgency for them to actually act. And then so start, you kind of want to sketch those out, and we've got a framework down below that you can download to help you do that. And then based on your inputs, you're going to decide what your revenue model is. So that's where you start looking at your pricing logic. You start to choose where to be flexible, where to lock in assumptions. And then these determine who says yes and who says no. And that will help you kind of build out that framework. So outputs are what the customer sees. Things like tiers, bundles, contracts, discounts. Outputs, those should be adjustable. As you get more data from the market, as you learn things, you want to be able to take your pricing up or take it down based on supply and demand, based on competitive landscape and things like that. So that allows you that flexibility with your pricing structure, as long as you built in all of that stuff with your revenue model up front. And again, those are based upon the inputs. The inputs, again, being deliveries, cost of goods sold, willingness to pay for your customers. How many of your customers can you actually get in front of over a given course of time? What is their likeliness to buy? What is the urgency with which they're going to make the decision? What are their alternatives? Things like that. Again, we kind of covered that. Okay, so when it comes down to your revenue model, what this comes down to is really understanding your trade-offs. There is no universal best model. I'm not going to tell you that, oh, SaaS is always the best, or you want to sell a real product to somebody. No, it really, again, this goes back to your founder fit, your some of the earlier modules where we looked at business direction and how that applies to your background and what you want out of life. Each model has its trade-offs. Those trade-offs can be predictability, cash flow, timing of that cash flow, the operational load associated not just with delivering your product or service, but also getting new customers, the acquisition of new customers. Subscriptions, services, usage-based, product sales, those are all different models and they're all valid in the right context. Within the handbook or the digital startup playbook here, we actually have a bunch of the models listed below. You can take a look at them and get an understanding so that you're building the right model for you. Understanding your business model is key, and then you build your revenue model around that. The right model is going to fit your constraints. It's not just what sounds impressive. And that brings us to another kind of common mistake: underpricing. Founders do it a lot. Overpricing happens a lot too. People get overzealous or a little bit inflated on their own ego, or a little drunk on their own Kool-Aid, and they can overprice. But hey, if a customer is paying for it, then I'm not going to knock you for it. Get paid what you can for the value that you're providing. But that is where underpricing can become very dangerous. Underpricing driven by fear will create long-term damage. You're locking yourself in to that customer pricing, and then other customers are going to expect the same thing. You may be eroding your profits before you've actually even done any work. Additionally, things always cost more and take longer than you think. That is kind of a project management 101 basic thing to know. It's no less true in business or in selling services or products. It's one of those things where you really want to be cautious before you're going to underprice yourself. If you're doing it for a strategic reason, perhaps you're trying to accelerate adoption, or you're reducing your customer acquisition cost, or it's a key opinion leader that you really want to get for whatever, it provides other value because it can bring other customers and overall, maybe it gets you distribution to a new channel. There are absolutely reasons to underprice, but you have to be strategic about it. You want to make sure that you are being intentional and most of the time temporary, not just doing it out of emotion or desperation. Another thing to kind of note here is having balance as you're going through this. You want to have rigidity with your pricing because you don't want people to just be all over the place in terms of what the perceived value of what you're providing is. But you also don't want to be so rigid that you are costing yourself customers. Understanding that customer acquisition is half of the equation here. So product or service sells, absolutely. Customer acquisition, what am I really trying to say there? Half of the problem is building the product. The other half is selling the product. You can have the greatest product, but if you're not actually getting customers for it, it doesn't really matter. And what if you do 90% of the work to get a customer and then lose them at the end because you're slightly overpriced or you're just not quite framing it the right way? That's where the flexibility comes into. So you do want to have some balance there. Being able to have flexibility with things like packages and doing and distributive negotiation with as it pertains to contract negotiations. And if you don't know what distributive versus integrative negotiation, distributive is essentially me versus you. It's win-lose, and integrative is win, right? Kind of expanding the pie, finding new ways to work together. Maybe I can forego something that I don't really care about, but it's really important to you. Something like payment terms. Maybe payment terms are not very important to your customer, but they're really crucial to you. So you can do a 10% discount if they pay net 10 versus net 30. And that extra cash flow for your business might mean the absolute world. So just those are a few examples of where having some of that flexibility in your pricing model can really pay dividends. So you want to kind of build some of that in at the beginning into how you're doing this. Capital efficiency and runway awareness. If you're lucky enough to either have your own funding, your own savings, or be lucky enough to have relationships where you actually do close money through external investors or grants, you may get $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can feed myself, I can pay my employees, I can pay some of these bills off. I will tell you from experience that money goes very, very quickly. Even if you have capital, you want to be extraordinarily efficient with it. I promise you, there are going to be things that cost more than you thought. There are going to be things that come faster than you thought, that in terms of negatives, in terms of things that you have to pay for. There's going to be pivots you have to make. There's going to be regulatory hurdles. There's going to be things that get in your way. So it's really, really important to be super efficient with the spending of that capital, and be hyper aware of what your runway is. And so I bring that up because pricing has a massive impact on this. Your pricing affects your burn rate and your runway, your time to cash, your likelihood of closing cash, how much of your cash is being reinvested versus paying bills. All of those things really, really come into play. In fact, it determines whether or not you even need outside capital. Strong cash flow can eliminate funding needs pretty much entirely. So that's another thing to really consider as it pertains to how you're going to do your pricing and your business model. Do you need capital? Do you not? How much of a runway do you have or not? So again, keep those things into mind. Okay, that kind of summarizes everything that goes into it, all the different inputs and outputs. So now there's a worksheet here that you can download, and what it does is it's going to force you to list your constraints and then help you decide which of those things are variables that you want to test, and then which of those things are locked in that are part of your design constraints and considerations. That will then connect into pricing theory for whatever your specific situation is. And again, if you need to go back to the business models from the previous module, go ahead and take a look at that. But once you understand your inputs, and then you can design your entire pricing system, that will essentially tell you whether or not you have the realism to be successful in the first year or 2 years or 3 years, or what your runway to success is. And then therefore, if you need to raise capital or not. So with that said, that kind of summarizes this module. And again, it reframes pricing from just doubling or tripling whatever your COGS is into more of a system. And so you should now understand kind of how all of those different inputs can affect and should impact your business and pricing models. Next, we'll make sure that the business is structured correctly, because legal and business structure determines how risk, ownership, and growth are handled. So I will see you in the next module for that.